So let's start off and talk about the hazards of an electric arc. When we look at an electric arc has two components. It has a blast component. I've had electrical workers in some of my classes who've told me they've been working on electrical panel boards. They've actually had the panel board cover come flying by and miss their head by about a foot. That's the blast component, and that's a significant hazard. We also have the flash component. The flash component is the fire component. And the concern is with an electric arc flash is you can easily ignite your clothing. Now, arc flash temperatures may reach upwards of 35,000 degrees. What I would say is it's very, very common for an arc flash to be 5,000 degrees plus. Now, by comparison, the sun is a cool, balmy 9,000 degrees. One of the concerns or hazards with copper is in an electric arc, when you have copper vaporize, when it goes from a solid state and when it vaporizes, it expands 67,000 times. In other words, it's going from a small volume to a very large volume. Now, when I teach courses, I always ask at the very beginning of the course, by show of hands, who has experienced an electric arc flash? And what I can tell you, in every single class I've ever taught with electrical workers, I've had at least one, and quite often a third of the class raise their hand and say, yes, I've been involved in electric arc flash, or it happened to a friend of mine. And what they mentioned to me is that it sounds like a shotgun going off. And one of the students in class said, well, no, I wouldn't say a shotgun, I'd say a howitzer. But to be serious for just a second, when we think of an electric arc, the sound is very intense and it's very loud. One of the concerns is that pressure wave can be over 2,000 pounds per square foot. So that's something that can physically knock you backwards, and that can knock you into walls. When we look at electric arcs, up to 80% of electrical injuries are burns resulting from an employee's clothing catching on fire, and then the employee quite often trying to take the clothing off. He or she's on fire. But what very, very commonly happens as well is you have the injured employee, and then the injured employee's coworker, they attempt to get the clothing off. So quite often you'll have not just one injury, but you'll have two or more injuries. Just to mention to you that when we talk about cotton clothing, materials like that, typically cotton clothing will ignite at about 500 to 700 degrees. So an electric arc, something that's thousands of degrees in temperature, can very easily ignite cotton clothing. Now, the other concern with clothing is that if you have polypropylene, synthetic materials, polyester, it's not so much that it's flammable, but it melts back to your skin. So that's the hazard with a lot of the synthetic materials, is it's melting back to your skin. Every day in the United States, we get about 5 to 10 workers that are hospitalized due to electric arc flash burns. Now, I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I'm only about a mile away from the UNC Burn Center at the Chapel Hill Hospital. And about 6 or 7 years ago, we had 5 electrical workers get significantly burned by an electric arc flash. One was so severely burned that he was sent to the burn center at UNC, which is the JC Burn Center, and he was there for several months. And what I'll mention to you when we talk about electric arc flash burns is it's one of the most painful types of injuries that you can go through. So from an employee standpoint, there's a lot of pain and suffering with the employee with a burn. Also financially, if you have an employee involved in an electric arc and they're sent to a burn center, typically that's going to cost you about $1 million a month. Now, your workers' compensation may pay for that, but the problem is your premiums ultimately are going to go up. So it's in your best interest to protect your workers with protective clothing, but also it's, good business sense from a financial standpoint.